Chelsea. This is my booktube channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing my fancy booktube hat, and today I am bringing you my promised series review of the Graceling Realm trilogy by Kristin Cashore. I got all three of them from the library, so this is the only one that I have right now. This is a young adult fantasy series. It is also a companion series, so the three books are connected and they share characters, but they aren't part of one story arc. The first book is Graceling, the second book is Fire, and the third book is Bitter Blue. I read the first two books last year, so it's been a while, so I'm going to keep this pretty concise and just hit what I think are some of the major points that I'd like to convey about these books. The first book, Graceling, follows a character named Katsa. This takes place in a world, the Graceling realms, that are comprised of a variety of kingdoms, where the people who have magical abilities of some sort or another are called Gracelings, and they have mismatched eyes. Katsa is a Graceling, and she's a graced fighter, which means she has superpower fighting skills, which is like super convenient in an action-packed fantasy novel. I gave this book 4 stars pretty much for pure enjoyment. It kept me reading, I didn't want to put it down, I needed to know what was going to happen. It also had a really cute romance. I think I gave this book a lot of leeway in my mind for being a debut novel. I think that shows in some ways. The world building as a fantasy world with these kingdoms is pretty generic. It's very sort of cookie-cutter fantasy world. Katsa's grace makes things really super convenient in a way that felt a little bit like cheating, and I felt like the writing lacked some polish. That said, the storyline was pretty addictive, and I appreciated how Kristin Cashore was very obviously trying to integrate some progressive social ideas and so forth into a traditional fantasy kingdom setting, and I think she did that pretty well with this story. The second book, Fire, is pretty interesting. It follows a completely different protagonist, actually in a country that's across the mountains from the Graceling realms, and it's outside of the known world to the people in the first book. In this one, I thought the world building and the magical elements were far more adventurous, so I give Kristin Cashore points for that. I found that they kind of fell flat for me, though. There's a very specific through line about the protagonist Fire's unnatural colored hair and how she can't let it be seen, so she covers it up. But never once was there any mention of like whether or not she has eyebrows, and that just bugged me the entire book long. I was thinking, what about her eyebrows? Plot, likewise, was a little more adventurous, a little more ambitious, I thought. It also kind of fell flat for me in some places. It felt a little bit like it was just dragged out too long. It didn't necessarily all connect the way it should. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think the way the resolution to the main storyline depended on something that emerged from the world of the first book pretty late on in the second book. Felt like if you hadn't read Graceling first and it sort of advertised as you don't need to read Graceling first, that would have felt like storyline cheating in a strange way. So I didn't enjoy Fire nearly as much as Graceling. I gave it 3 stars. I did think of all the 3 books, I may have liked the romance in this one the best, and all 3 books are pretty romance heavy. So that's what kept it as a 3-star for me instead of a 2-star book. My favorite, I think, was Bitter Blue, which is the 3rd book. This takes place a good number of years after Graceling. Fire actually takes place considerably beforehand, even though it's meant to be read afterwards. The protagonist of this book, Bitter Blue, who has like one of the best names I've ever read in a fantasy book, I think that's just an amazing name, She is a supporting character from the first book, and to say much more I think would be spoilers, but we are back in the Graceling realms physically in this book. But we're specifically in one kingdom, and I think the setting of this book is actually much better done than it was in the first book. I think there's more attention to detail, more subtlety. I liked some of the atmosphere of this book. I feel like that was really lacking in the first book. You've got secret passageways and weird art and cryptography, and those are all things that I go for. These are, story elements in this book that to me sort of built an atmosphere that I was really happy to dive into. This book has also got some cool art between portions of the book, and I really liked that. Again, I would definitely suggest reading this after the first two because of the ways in which things from actually both of the first two books do play into this book, even though it's kind of advertised as you can read them in any order. And I think what this book really did a good job of was sort of showcasing a bunch of the characters and themes from the first two books and sort of tying it all together in a very feel-good way. This is a fairly long book. It's over 500 pages. I read it for Tome Topple, but it's still pretty light, very quick reading, and I didn't feel like I got bogged down in it at all, like I got bogged down a little in fire. I gave this 4 stars, which is the same rating I gave Graceling. I think for me, though, this was a bit of a higher 4 stars. It didn't quite make it to 5 for me, though, but this was a pretty high 4 stars. Now, I've mentioned that this series is very romance-heavy. It's also, I think, very focused on showing a diverse range of different types of functional romantic relationships, and I really appreciated that. I think that shows very strongly in Bitter Blue, where you kind of see snapshots of a lot of the different characters from the first 2 books further down the road. I think there's also a very conscious focus in all 3 books, maybe more in the first 2 books, but really in all 3 on women's reproductive choice, which you do not see a lot in fantasy novels for young adults, and I think that's a problem, and I think that's a problem that Kristin Cashore is actively trying to address. I also imagine that Kristin Cashore was very conscious of presenting 3 heroines who are very different in their personalities, but all sort of struggle with some of the same main challenges that this world throws at them in different ways. So I think even though they're pretty fluffy in some ways, they're actually pretty clever in others. And I thought this was just a really fun series to read. Anyhow, I am losing my daylight here, so I am going to wrap this up. Please let me know if you've read these books, what you thought of them, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, want to chat, anything else. I've got a whole ton of videos that I need to film, and I'm procrastinating filming them because I'm not sure which ones to do first. So hopefully you'll be seeing a whole lot more from me over the next few days, weeks, etc. Okay, that is all. Bye for now.